Ellis B. Feaster's Radio Aircheck and Classic TV channel.
Talk Radio 68, WRKO, Boston.
An RKO radio station.
Do you ever wonder whether that music has any end to it? Let's see if it has an end. And who cares? I'd rather have my whistler friend do it all day. Well, hi. Anybody stuck on Route 3 South? We ought to maybe do a follow-up at 5 o'clock, see if the commissioner would like to do a follow-up. Give us some more information at 5 o'clock today. Yesterday, let me start fresh, shall we? Let's see, my name tag from camp on there. I'm Gerald. And if you'd like to get on the air, hey, what an idea that is. Actually, do you ever hear of an idea like this? You pick up a phone and call and we put you on the air. Hey, isn't that... What an idea! What a fantastic idea! You pick up your telephone, wait a minute, let's start again. Don't, not till I say go. Can you imagine? I was just sitting here thinking, what kind of a show could this be on the radio? Let's see, do you have a tape recorder in there? Yes, good. And people could call up, say, get it? What number is there? 266-686. That's a good number. It coincides with our own frequency. 266-6868. And then you call me. See? Got the idea? And then we put you on the air. Wow. What a night. And to keep so that people don't, do obscene words or anything like that, why, we'll just delay the tape a little bit. Got it? Do you have a little button there you can press? What happens when you press the button? Okay? Press the button, and that shows you what happens in case you mention a dirty word. What? This could be something new in radio. Get me that book on Brecht on theater. I'll tell you how I got this idea. I was just sitting around one day, not doing anything, talking to myself, and I was saying, myself, you, me, I, we've got to come up with some new ideas in radio. Radio. The imagination of the mind. The golden tones of one's voice. How could we not only involve ourselves on this side, but involve everybody there? Tell you where I got the idea. I was just sitting around the house. I wasn't doing that, and I was just sitting around. Remember Frankie Fontaine? And, well, let me go back just a bit. I know this is not going to interest many people. Might be driving around the car and say, what's this guy talking about? He crazy? He's been smoking something, sniffing something, drinking something. What is he doing? Well, this book was first published in Great Britain in 1964, and it was translated from the German. Bertolt Brecht on theater. The Development of an Aesthetic, edited and translated by John Willett. And I think you'd be interested in reading this book. It's a paperback. Isn't this a great idea I have? Wait a minute now. When you see this book was written, Page 51 was written between 1918 and 1932. When did Marconi, when did we first have radio? Was it in the 20s? In the 20s. Actual commercial radio began in the 20s. 1920. Guglielmo Marconi and a couple of other guys, Leo DeForest among them. Somebody thinks that Leo DeForest had a big band, but that's not true. He had to do with the vacuum tube. And here I have to deal with the vacuum brains. And this guy's dealing with the vacuum tube. With Bertolt Brecht, that great German literary giant, wrote back somewhere in the period between 1918 and 1932. So it must have been closer to the 20s. In an essay called The Radio as an Apparatus of Communication. Can you imagine the radio as an apparatus of communication? That's incredible, people. Nobody ever thought of the radio as an apparatus of communication at all. And Brecht, B-R-E-C-H-T, Bertold, B-E-R-T, H-O-L-D-T, is it? Well, whatever. Writes, in our society, one can invent and perfect discoveries that still have to conquer their market and justify their existence. In other words, discoveries that have not been called for. Thus, there was a moment when technology was advanced enough to produce the radio, and society was not yet advanced enough to accept it. The radio was then in its first phase of being a substitute for theater, opera, concerts, lectures, cafe music, local newspapers, and so forth. This was the patience period of halcyon youth. I am not sure if it is finished yet, wrote Brecht, but if so, then this stripling, who needed no certificate of competence to be born, will have to start looking retrospectively for an object in life, just as a man will begin asking at a certain age, when his first innocence has been lost, what he is supposed to be doing in the world. As for radio's object, this is the important part. Brecht wrote, I don't think it can consist merely in prettifying public life. Nor is radio, in my view, an adequate means of bringing back coziness to the family and making family life bearable again. But quite apart from the dubiousness of its function, radio, he wrote back in the 20s or 30s, is one-sided when it should be two. It is purely an apparatus for distribution, for mere sharing out. So here is a positive suggestion. The radio would be the finest possible communication apparatus in public life. A vast network of pipes. That is to say, it would be if it knew how to receive as well as to transmit, how to let the listener speak as well as hear, how to bring him into a relationship instead of isolating him. On this principle, the radio should step out of the supply business and organize its listeners as suppliers. Any attempt by the radio to give a truly public character to public occasions is a step in the right direction. And furthermore, in this essay, he writes, whatever the radio sets out to do, it must strive to combat that lack of consequences which makes asses of almost all of our public institutions. We have a literature without consequences, which not only itself sets out to lead nowhere, but does all it can to neutralize its readers by depicting each object and situation stripped of the consequences to which they lead. We have educational establishments without consequences, working frantically to hand on an education that leads nowhere and has come from nothing. The slightest advance in this direction is bound to succeed far more spectacularly than any performance of a culinary kind. And as for the technique that needs to be developed for all such operations, it must follow the prime objective of turning the audience not only into pupils, but into teachers. It is the radio's formal task to give these educational operations an interesting turn, i.e., to ensure that these interests interest people. Such an attempt by efforts of modern artists to give art an instructive character. As an example, or model of the exercises, etc., 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 and he goes on to talk about other things. But wasn't that insightful? That the radio, he said, is purely an apparatus for distribution. It's way back now, 50 years ago, for mere sharing out. So here is a positive suggestion: change this apparatus over from distribution to communication. The radio would be the finest possible communications apparatus in public life, a vast network of pipes. That is to say, it would be, if it knew how to receive as well as to transmit, how to let the listener speak as well as hear, how to bring him into a relationship instead of isolating him. On this principle, the radio should step out of the supply business and organize its listeners as suppliers. Bertolt Brecht on theater, way back. I'm not sure the exact date of that essay, but obviously it was in the, I think it was 1931. No, I'm sorry. It was July 1932. So I just had that idea, just sitting around thinking, what a wonderful idea to make the listeners into suppliers. I was just sitting around here not thinking about what to think, what records to play, and what I could do in my 4-hour monologue today. But if we could just organize our listeners to speak out, give us the benefit of their brain power, wouldn't that be an exciting way to go? Now, years back when I first began in talk radio, would you believe it, there weren't even such things as tape recorders. There were wire recorders. Has anybody ever seen a wire recorder? Come on. I mean, if you're 30 years old, you probably don't know what I'm talking about. They were wire recorders on little thin strips of wire. And you couldn't edit the wire. I mean, once you tape recorded on the, once you wire recorded, that was the technique. That was it. I mean, there was no editing, couldn't put any pieces together or anything like that. It wasn't too far back. It was in the 50s, early 50s, when they had wire recording. So actually, you couldn't delay anything on the air. And my first radio talk show was done with myself. It was a show called What's on Your Mind? And it was done on WKDN in Camden, New Jersey at noon. From noon to 1 o'clock, What's on Your Mind? When somebody would call, I would obviously repeat what they had to say, because we weren't allowed under the rules to put a live voice on the air without some sort of built-in method of delaying it. Obviously, there were no methods of delaying it, so radio talk shows started in the early days by Jack Eigen, who used to do a radio talk show, an interview show, actually, at the Copacabana in New York. Jack Eigen eventually migrated to Chicago and then to Florida. I think he passed away. Hope he didn't, but I think he did. But in case he didn't, I remember once saying that about an agent, that he had died, and his wife called and said, Eddie Suez ain't dead, he's only half dead. And he was still alive. So if I made a mistake about Jack Eigen, I'm sorry. But I used to repeat what the callers had to say. Oh, is that what you think about the president? Well, I don't know about that. You say that the president is a good fellow and he's all of... No, I don't think he's a good fellow at all. What do you mean he's a good... This went on for 45 minutes every day. Me arguing with myself, and guess what? I got in more trouble in those days because actually, in the 50s, there wasn't a heck of a lot of talk on radio. It was mostly music, not very much talk. The talk was generally between records. There was no such things as all news stations. And I did get in a lot of trouble on that particular radio show, particularly with my enemies on the religious right. There was a Reverend Carl McIntyre of the American Council of Churches, whose base was in Camden, New Jersey, took out a full-page ad, I remember, in the Camden Courier-Post about remarks I had made about him being anti-Catholic. And, of course, he is anti-Catholic. I don't know whether he's alive or dead. If he's alive, good, and if he's dead, that's the way life goes. I think he may still be alive. I'm not sure. He had a pirate ship, is that right, with well, anyway, I was just sitting here thinking, wouldn't it be a wonderful concept just to have people call in to be suppliers instead of just listeners, to be distributors of sound? What a fantastic idea. The radio is the best of it. This is before television, of course, when Brecht wrote this on theater, and he obviously did not perceive, probably he did, but he didn't talk about it, that radio was the new method of communicating, and then when you wanted to hear symphony or pop music or a drama or comedy or comedians, you would listen to the radio during that time because there was no television. Sunday night in my own house was Jack Benny and Phil Harris and Walter Winchell. My father would never miss Walter Winchell. Manhattan Merry-Go-Round, that was the Sunday lineup. They were great programs, by the way. Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy. And we sat around, believe it or not, listening to the radio. I mean, a kid today can't possibly conceive of one sitting around and listening to these shows on the radio. The Shadow, Little Orphan Annie, Chandu the Magician. Dick Tracy was one of my great favorites. Amos and Andy. Amos and Andy was a great program, by the way. Those two comedians were both blackface. They were white, and they played Amos and Andy in blackface. At least that's what the publicity and promotion said they were doing. But you see, that was part of the culture at that time. It might have been racist at the time, only we didn't know it was racist at the time. And if you see them now, if you see some of those old Amos and Andy films, blacks don't like it being shown. But actually, it was right for the time. It may not have been kind, but it was the American culture at the time. And of course, you can't go back and change the times. You can't change Mark Twain. Mark Twain was what he is, what he was, what he did. And you can't change Booth Tarkington either. They were of that time, of that era, of that period. So we can't go back and say, take out this line in 1985 of Mark Twain having to do with somebody saying nigger in Tom Sawyer, because that's what that was all about, and that's what Tom Sawyer might have said during the period of life of Mark Twain. Why am I explaining something so fundamental as that? Even that probably is controversial. Well, here we are. I've talked for 23 minutes. Just had the wonderful idea of people being able to call in and give their opinions. What a fantastic idea. Actually, Eigen, Barry, who were the first talkers in the United States? Eigen, Barry Gray, who's still in New York, alive and well. Probably Sherm from this town was one of the early ones. And I hate to throw myself in that category, but I'm one of the earlier ones, too. I first started doing talk shows in I am not going to tell. There was a little show called Are You Kidding? 15 minutes, inspired by Henry Morgan. Henry Morgan had his own show. Who's Henry Morgan now? So, well, he used to be a regular on the What's My Line show. What's My Line? I got to explain that for a lot of 30-year-olds. What's My Line? Who used to say, "And on my white John Charles dare we?" Bennett Cerf. And who had no chin on that show? Dorothy Killjoy, I used to call her. Dorothy Kilgallen. Some people still think she had something to do with various conspiracies in higher echelons of government. I don't want to put her down. One night I was in Philadelphia doing a show. Early talk shows were done in restaurants. Barry Gray used to do one in New York City at a steakhouse restaurant, and Eigen used to do it from the Copacabana and other places in Chicago. And I did it. I really had class. I did it from a joint called the Prime Rib. I mean, really one of the class acts. And I was talking about Dorothy Killjoy one night incessantly in this restaurant. Seated right in front of me was her husband. She used to have a show called Dorothy and Dick. And her husband, that was on WOR in New York. I can say WOR in New York because it's one of the stations at RKO General. But I wanted to say over on Soldiers Field Road. I can't say that. See? I'm not allowed to say that. But WOR in New York I can say. Which shows you how stupid we are and how immature we are, even to this date, 50 years later. We can't mention call letters. So other stations, how do we identify them? I don't know. Now, isn't this interesting? Isn't this something you're really tuned in for? It's 225 WRKO. This is Jerry Williams. Our phone number, we actually have a phone that you can call and get on the air. Isn't that incredible? What an idea. The early days of talk radio. Where was I with talk radio? Back at WOR, Dorothy and Dick. Well, then I ventured over to another restaurant in town. I was one of the biggies, Lou Tendler's. Lou Tendler in Philadelphia. Lou was a lightweight champion, I think, a middleweight champion at one time. And he owned a restaurant in town. And I used to sit at a little podium, sort of in the midst of the front area of the restaurant, and people used to come by me, not knowing what was going on. It was on a station. Whose call letters are no longer, I think, in Philly, WIBG. We Believe in God, it was supposed to be. And people used to come right by me, come about 2 inches away from my face while I was talking, and, what are you doing? I mean, what's going on? And they had no idea why I was there. To this day, I don't know why I was there. Steve Allison, he was from Boston. Revere was one of the early talkers in the field as well. But all the rest are all my students. They're all my students. 266-6868 is our number here on WRKO. I'm going to take a very short intermission. Hasn't this been interesting so far? I mean, don't you get a kick out of this so far? This may be a 4-hour monologue. I'll see when I run out of gas.
Oh, Mr. Pitney! Yes, Mr. Bose! Oh, Mr. Pitney! Yes, Mr. Bose! What makes us new contenders in the copier world? Feature for feature, toe to toe, there's a lot we've got to show. Absolutely, Mr. Pitney. Positively, Mr. Bose.
The new contender copiers from Pitney Bowes have features that can go up against anybody's. Sorting, stacking, collating, reducing, enlarging, even copying on both sides. And they're all backed by the famous Pitney Bowes nationwide service system. To find out more, just call 1-800-MR. Bose or look us up in your phone book.
Oh, Mr. Pitney! Yes, Mr. Bose! Oh, Mr. Pitney! Yes, Mr. Bose! So we're new contenders in the copier world. Feature for feature, blow for blow, there's a lot we've got to show. Absolutely, Mr. Pitney. Positively, Mr. Bose. Feature for feature, blow for blow, there's a lot we've got to show. Absolutely, Mr. Pitney. Positively, Mr. Bose.
Jerry Williams.
RKO.
Weekdays, 2 till 6. Your kind of talk.
On the talk station.
The sweet smell of success doesn't happen overnight. Whether you drive a truck or run a company, you know what it takes to make it in this world. So do the men of Macanudo. It takes them more than 2 years to make the ultimate cigar. And a Macanudo is the ultimate, because it's still made from the finest tobacco leaves in the world. Still made step by step by hand, just the way the first Macanudo was made over 100 years ago. No wonder more and more men are discovering that this is the cigar with the sweet smell of success. This Father's Day, ask your favorite smoke shop for the box of Macanudos that was made for you, because a man has it made with a Macanudo, the ultimate cigar.
Things are going fine, yeah. Wouldn't you? Right on down the line, yeah. This is you, Buick Summer
Somerset. It drives like you and feels like you.
Somerset, let them know it's you, yeah. Somerset, everything you do, yeah.
The very personal Somerset. An innovative Buick looking for a long-term relationship.
Wouldn't you really rather have a Buick?
Aren't you glad to know you'll be your best today? Aren't you glad there's time to make you feel that way? Aren't you glad for being together? Aren't you glad when people smile? Aren't you glad you use time? Aren't you glad you use time? Aren't you glad you use time?
But quite apart from the dubiousness of its functions, radio is one-sided, when it should be two. It is purely an apparatus for distribution, for mere sharing out. So here is a positive suggestion. Change this apparatus over from distribution to communication. The radio would be the finest possible communication apparatus in public life, a vast network of pipes. That is to say, it would be, if it knew how to receive as well as to transmit, how to let the listener speak as well as hear, how to bring him into a relationship instead of isolating him. On this principle, the radio should step out of the supply business and organize its listeners as suppliers. Any attempt by the radio to give a truly public character to public occasions is a step in the right direction. Bertolt Brecht wrote back in the 30s. Incredible, the kind of insight some people have. Now, where was I back with Dorothy and Dick? On WOR in New York? They were some of the early talkers. Early talkers. In this city, Sherm probably was the earliest of monologists. He's a very fine monologist. Of course, Gene Shepard is a fine monologist. Some people are now looking up the book to find out what is a monologist. Henry Morgan was early on, very early on. His show was called Here's Morgan and also was on WOR. It's nice to be able to pronounce somebody else's call letters. WOR, which is in New York and is owned by RKO General. And he was on at 6:30 in the evening on a program called Here's Morgan. Just did 15 minutes, was unheard of. Absolutely unheard of for somebody to speak for 15 minutes total, only interrupted by a couple of commercials. Henry Morgan is a very bright, satiric, witty, and caustic human being. I wish he would do more of that. He's still around, but he was a panelist on occasion on What's My Line. And on my way, John Charles Dewey. Those were the early talkers. I'm trying to think of where else they might have been in what other cities. Miami had some early talkers. No, I can't remember exactly who they were. I know that Barry Gray was down there for a while. But nobody extremely well known. It was Barry Gray and Jack Eigen. Barry's still in New York. One of my colleagues, Bob Grant, is in New York. He still has been around for 30-odd years and kind of right-wing, but fun and entertaining to listen to as well. I just thought it would be a wonderful idea to have a two-way conversation. When did the two-way business begin? After the wire recordings went out, which I would say is 57? I don't think so. I don't think it was earlier. Tape came in the mid or late 50s. Even then we didn't know much about it. Not too many people knew much about tape. In the early days today, you can literally do anything. The machinery is such that you can do it. To clip a piece of tape, we used to have to organize the delay by stringing one tape recorder to another tape recorder so that you could have one tape recorder recording and the other tape recorder playing back with a big loop in between of tape so that you could delay it as much as you can. I remember when the delay didn't work once over around here at Fenway Park in my first excursion into Boston Talk Radio. I had Daisy Bates on. Who's Daisy Bates? Daisy Bates was head of the Arkansas Little Rock NAACP. NAACP, I'll be all right. NAACP. And of course, those were the days when Eisenhower was president, and a little black girl wanted to go to school in Little Rock. Daisy Bates, head of the NAACP, was my guest, and somebody obviously threw a curve at her. No, the curve came after she left. She stayed in the studio for about an hour. Then somebody called up and he said, certainly enjoyed, no, really baited me into it, led me into the trap. And then said, you had a very interesting show with Ms. Bates, and you are a blankety blank, and she is a boom. The tape was done in those days because my boss there was cheap. The cheapest boss I've ever met. I've met some cheap bosses in my time, but he was the cheapest. And that tape delay didn't work. You see, there was an engineer at the time sitting way up above me, somewhere near John Kiley's organ. And that's where, they had a big theater organ in the studio at the old WMEX. And the engineer was listening to the delay. He was not listening to the broadcast as it went on the air, as I was doing it. He was listening to the delay 7 or 8 seconds later. And when he heard those words echo through, he sort of looked down at me, and I looked up at him. I had punched the button, and it went sailing through the tape recorder. Little lady hit the button. You know that that was the first time a word with the letter F, I think, was ever heard in Boston radio, and nobody said a word about it? Not a word. There wasn't even a reaction to it. It's just that it was so blatant and so cruel that nobody said a word about it. They wanted to ignore it. Really bizarre. I remember that was the first time that had ever happened to me. I think it might have been back in 1958. At the old 23 minutes before 3, WRKO, Jerry Williams here. It'd be a wonderful idea, though, to have that sort of thing on the air. The radio would be the finest possible communication apparatus in public life, a vast network of pipes. That is to say, it would be if it knew how to receive as well as to transmit. Now, if I told you, tomorrow I'm leaving. I'm going to be away for 3 days. I'm going to Atlantic City and Paragon Travel arranged the whole thing, and we're going early in the morning, and I'll be back next Monday. But so this is my last show for the week. Now, if I told you that Paragon could arrange for you to spend a week in Hawaii for as little as $638, what would you do? You'd call Paragon Travel right away, because where else but at Paragon would you expect to find this spectacular vacation at such reasonable prices? Imagine 1 week in Hawaii for as little as $638 per person. Double occupancy, that includes round-trip air via American Airlines from Boston, Providence, or Hartford. Accommodations for 7 nights in beautiful Honolulu, sightseeing, and still more. Now, you can stay a week or two. Make up your own mind. Paragon offers a deluxe escorted tour to Hawaii's outer islands of Maui, Kona, Hawaii, and Kauai, including inter-island flights, sightseeing, many meals, and still more. So if you'd like to discover Hawaii, do it the Paragon way by calling Paragon right now in Boston, 423-4390, 423-4390, or toll-free from anywhere in New England at 1-800-225-8566. Travel on with Paragon to Hawaii. It's irresistible.
Hi, I'm Merlin Olson. Summer's a great time, isn't it? Life just gets to be more exciting and colorful. Sunshine and flowers. I always get such a lift when I see them. Flowers have that effect. That's why they're such great gifts. like the FTD Pick Me Up Bouquet. It's the perfect way to pick up a friend. Beautiful flowers, a rainbow coffee mug, that colorful tote bag, and you can send it for any reason. The FTD Pick Me Up Bouquet, the perfect way to send a little summer to a friend. Call your FTD florist today.
That's right.
That's worth $4,068.
And you're a winner.
I can't believe it.
What are you going to do? You have just
You really
won
got it.
$6,800, Irene.
Oh, my God, I'm shaking.
Well, $4,068.
I can't believe it.
Neither can I.
The winning checkbook sweepstakes on 68 AM RKO.
The talk station.
It's a beautiful day at the IBM PC Classic. Young business person Tom Mabley has just purchased an IBM PC and one of the new IBM printers. Quite a decision for a first-timer, Tom.
Well, I saw what I wanted, Bob, and I went for it.
Is IBM really going to make the difference?
Oh, no doubt about it, Bob. When you choose the right iron, you make the right shot.
Well put, Tom. And that's it from the IBM PC Classic, the personal computer event now in full swing at a participating dealer near you. Or call your IBM representative.
If you're a homeowner and you need a loan, call up the Loan Depot, pick up the phone, 848-3006.
Well, don't miss the Topsfield Strawberry Festival on Saturday, June 15th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., along with 2,000 shortcakes. A few fruitcakes will be in there, too, I'm sure. 120 craftspeople from all over New England will be represented. Now, isn't this interesting so far? This whole idea of being able to talk on the radio, using your telephone as a microphone, isn't that fascinating? Just got that from reading this book. Everything you ever wanted to know about theater is in this book, Brecht on Theater. I'm sure I'm introducing that name to hundreds of thousands of Americans, and Bostonians, and Newtonians, and Canterbridgians, and Charlestonians, and Dorchesterites, all over the world. Dolly Dawn from Dorchester, next to the Dunkin' Donuts. That's what it's all about. Isn't this fascinating? Taking you a review through radio. Radio. Fascinating. What has become of the other medium, the new medium? Television. They're just as hung up as we are. Still. For many years in this city, the Boston Herald would refer to it on radio last night. And the Globe would do the same. I used to have Salt and Stalls and the Lodges and the Kennedys on, and every time it was quoted, it said, on radio last night. Didn't even mention what station, no less my own name. Jack Kennedy said. Or whatever. Hasn't changed much. We haven't matured. I've been here since 57, so 1985, it's 28 years. Is that right? 28 years? I've been in and out of the city on several occasions, but I'm back forever, I think. And still hasn't changed. Today, I met two very interesting, well-informed people. Or at least I thought they were well-informed. How do they remain well-informed? They watch TV. And they said that was some story about Susan Warnick, wasn't it? I said, yes, it was. I didn't say a word to give them a clue that the program had been involved in it at all. And I said, it was quite a story that he turned himself in. The source turned, well, wait a minute. I said, now I got involved. He didn't turn himself in. I was on was it Tuesday when it all began, or Tuesday or Wednesday? Whenever. I had attorney Larry O'Donnell on with me, and he and I were chatting about the whole situation, about Susan Warnick going to jail, and the quote, the source called in. And attorney O'Donnell convinced the source, after 36 hours of convincing, that he ought to turn himself in. Well, these two very astute people said, I didn't know that. Well, I said, how could you know it if those show business people on the TV news are hung up with entertainment. It's no longer giving the news, it's entertainment. They all look like entertainment tonight. Smiling Paula Zahn is the symbol of smiling woman. She's on the weekends, of course. And that Spanish lady, she ought to be glad she's Spanish or she wouldn't have any work. Liz Gonzalez on the weekend has got to take a course in just speaking the language as good as she can. Because it's all showbiz. It has nothing to do with capability or talent or truth or the tenets of journalism. Who, what, where, when, why. When did the source call? He called on that day at 5:34 in the evening. Who was there? Larry O'Donnell, attorney. Jerry Williams happened to be hosting the talk show. Happened to be. Where did this all take place? At WRKO AM radio, 5:34 in the afternoon. How did he get to go to the district attorney? He didn't turn himself in. O'Donnell convinced him after a day and a half of convincing to turn himself in. Why didn't Susan Warnick go to jail? Because he decided through O'Donnell and the happenstance meeting on the radio, which is the drama of the story. How could you leave out the drama of the story? Why does that bug you? It bugs me because it is a prejudice against radio. And particularly radio talk shows. And I never had a dinner. That's why. When I go to Atlantic City, guess who's going to be in Atlantic City? Red Buttons. And if I had to take a choice between the 3 or 4 shows that are there in Atlantic City, I think they're having some sort of La Cage aux Folles kind of show, something like that. I chose Red Buttons, who never had a dinner. And I never had a dinner either. Well, that's life. What else did this smart guy want to say when he walked in here? These people, I'm doing this as him. What did he have to say? Yeah, he loves when you do this. Oh, when I just chat about the early days, you want to bring in your wire recorder and take this all down?
When are you going to write the book?
When am I going to write the book? I can't write, so how can I write a book? I can dictate, but I can't write. But those are interested. I don't think the people of national consequence would be interested in books by a radio talk show host when he can't even be a part of a story that he was a part of. How can I be a part of a story that I'm not part of? Or how can I be a part of how can they excerpt? You see, that's what angers, that kind of thing has angered me all my professional career. Somebody will call in and go, or do something like that, saying, "Hey, just trying to get a little press for yourself, huh?" No, actually, I just happen to be in the right spot at the right time. All I want to do is make sure that Chet and Nat are accurate. When? Who? Let's go back to school now, girls and boys. Jeff Rosser, news director of Channel 7. Let's go back to journalism school. Order, order, order. Now, Mr. Rosser, what are the tenets of journalism? When? Who? Why? Where? What? Try, Rosser, to get that through your head. That it didn't happen on an RKO talk show. It happened at 5:34 in the afternoon on this talk show. And this particular talk show is hosted by me, Gerald St. John. You might as well mention that because obviously nobody on Channel 7 knew. And actually, those 2 people I spoke to today, who are very astute observers of the scene, didn't know. They didn't know, Jeff. You didn't inform them. That's because you're an amateur. It wasn't a radio talk show. It wasn't a WRKO. There are many WRKO radio talk shows. Which one? What time? Who? When? Why? Where? What? Which? Those are the tenets of journalism. I don't pretend to be a journalist. I'm not. But I know them. It would be unfair if I didn't mention that a story was in the Boston Globe or that it was on Channel 7. You know who did that to me once before, a couple of years back, when I was doing the boot thing? Remember the boot thing? We organized a huge crowd to go down to Faneuil Hall to march against the boot. I think the campaign was called Give Kevin the Boot, because they were booting everywhere. And guess what? Chet came out with their little cameras and rolled videotape. I mean, they took yards of videotape and never used it, by the way, on the 6 o'clock news. But they used it on a subsequent Chronicle program about a month later, which had to do with booting and parking in Boston. And there was all these people gathered together with all these signs that I had organized and on WRKO. And guess what? Not a mention where this crowd came from, or how they were gathered there, or why they were there. Who, Chet? When, Chet? Which, Chet? Why, Chet? Where, Chet? I am not going to forget. I keep rubbing it in, because this is the only place it can be rubbed. Why doesn't Greg Dawson write about this in the Herald? He's a media critic. I mean, why must we have these people smiling through tragedies every weekend who can't speak English? Anyway, it's 10 minutes to 3. WRKO, I'll take some calls eventually. You want some calls? These people want to communicate? Wait a second. Let's see what it says here in the book. The radio would be the finest possible communication apparatus in public life, a vast network of pipes, that is to say, would be if it knew how to receive as well as transmit, how to let the listener speak as well as hear, how to bring him into a relationship instead of isolating him, TV people. Don't isolate him. Don't ask him a dumb question for a 3. What'd you think of Klaus von Bülow? I think he was guilty. Thank you very much. Wow. What a real great remark to go to Providence to interview. Klaus, how do you feel? How do you feel, Klaus? How do you feel? How do you feel? Good. Have a headache. Never had a dinner.
Have a Trailways summer. There's a lot to be said. You're gonna save a lot when you go Big Red. On Trailways you can save no matter who you are. If you're headed near or if you're headed far, get 10% off. If you're 65 or older, there's a military discount for every soldier. If you're 4 years or younger, you get to ride free. And there's 12% off for the AARP. $129 is the maximum fare, even if your trip costs more by air. Small groups get a low fare that's nice. Kids 5 to 11 can go half price. When you go round trip, you better go pack it. 10% off on your way back. Up to 15% can be saved on tours. A chartered Trailways can be yours. And the Ready Box is ready to go. Ship your package for a price that's really low. See all of the sites from state to state on the USA Pass. It's really great. Unlimited stopovers are guaranteed. Stop winning where you want. Take the time you need. Have a Trailways summer. Think of what we said. There's a lot of ways to save when you go Big Red. Low fares everywhere, every bus, every seat, every day. For details, call Trailways now. Some restrictions apply.
Hi, I'm Merlin Olson. Summer's a great time, isn't it? Life just gets to be more exciting and colorful. Sunshine and flowers. I always get such a lift when I see them. Flowers have that effect. That's why they're such great gifts. Like the FTD Pick Me Up Bouquet. It's the perfect way to pick up a friend. Beautiful flowers, a rainbow coffee mug, that colorful tote bag, and you can send it for any reason. The FTD Pick Me Up Bouquet. The perfect way to send a little summer to a friend. Call your FTD florist today.
Dole fruit and juice bars aren't just for fun, they're for real.
Well, it's real, real fruit, and it's real, real juice, and it's real, real cool. Dole juice bar. Water refreshing way to eat fruit. Dole juice bar. Moms like it, dads like it, kids like it, and you like it. Water refreshing way to eat
Dole fruit and juice bars. Real fruit, real juice, real good.
Well, it's 6 minutes before 3 on WRKO. See, I can say that. 266-6868 on WRKO. On this principle, the radio should step out of the supply business and organize its listeners as suppliers. Any attempt by the radio to give a truly public character to public occasions is a step in the right direction. Bertolt Brecht on theater in the 30s. Oh, dear. Sort of thing. This is all, of course, in my own field. What else can I talk about but in my own field? I could talk about Billy Bulger. Nah, we wouldn't want to do that. To Billy, to the character of Massachusetts politics, to the people who reside in the big executive chairs in Washington, only a mirror of ourselves. Edwin Meese III, would you believe he just got $472,000 from us to pay his attorney's fees? $472,000 to pay his attorney fees from public money. Is that what's bothering you, Bunky? Is that what's troubling you, that Ed Meese got $472,000 to pay some of the Watergate attorneys to defend him against Howard Metzenbaum? Is that what's troubling you? Talk back. I wonder if we could actually put people on the radio. It would be an experiment. When did I first do that? Actually put a live voice on the radio. I can't think of when. A live voice. I'm trying to think of the first time we ever actually made it two-way. I think we did it without a delay. Way back in Camden, New Jersey. My first two-way talk radio show. In the 50s sometime. Yes, I think we put them on live, hoping that nobody would say anything unkind in an obscene way. Obscenity then. I mean, mentioning the word hell or damn was really forbidden. Verboten. Forbidden. You could not do that. And it would frighten a lot of radio station owners to have that sort of thing on the air. It wasn't good to talk about controversial things then, in those early days. As that Bertolt Brecht once said, the radio would be the finest possible communication apparatus in public life. A vast network of pipes. Did you ever hear TV people take phone calls? You know, they have no idea how to handle them. They're sort of an aside. You can't even... It's because... It's only the human voice. You see, the television people are so used to images, seeing him, getting a close-up, watching people's reactions, that the human voice to them really has no great meaning. So when Donahue takes a phone call or the Good Day Show takes a phone call, you don't even get the decent quality that you expect because the TV people don't think of that in terms of clarity. The only clarity they want is a picture, like Barbara Wawa. I was listening to Barbara Wawa this morning, the epitome of mediocrity, the symbol of mediocrity in television. Interview some actor, some non-person actor in Miami Vice, who all of a sudden has become a big man because of his role in Miami Vice. And as I turned my head from the television set and listened to the audio, it was really an obscenity. Because Barbara was so completely visual. Barbara Wawa was so visual that it was hard to hear the interview without actually watching her. And she said to this actor, "And did you, Scott, did you just go, woo, and that was it, and you became, woo, an actor?" You see, television shows the image, but if you listen to it on radio, it was stupid. Well, Are you thinking about re-siding your home? I'll bet you are. Then I have a message for you. Aluminum and vinyl siding carry guarantees of 30, 40, even 50 years, but these guarantees are useless if the siding is installed improperly. Proper installation includes the use of a non-corrosive nail. You know, galvanized nails are corrosion-resistant, but not non-corrosive or corrosion-proof. If you want the job done properly, tell the contractor to use nails made of aluminum. For the average house, $10 to $15 is enough to guarantee that job will never be ruined by rust stains. Cedar and redwood shingles contain chemicals that react with a protective coating on a galvanized nail. So, insist that your redwood or cedar siding, I'll be all right, and fences are installed with aluminum nails. Now, if you'd like more information on the proper installation of aluminum and vinyl siding, contact EM Snow Incorporated Waltham at 893-4546. In Danvers, contact Alliance Aluminum. The number is 774-2392. Well, hasn't this been an exciting hour? If you missed it, well, I just sort of stepped out. I won't go through the whole thing, but I will come back. And I think I will try an experiment by putting your actual voice on the air at 266-6868. It can be done. It's hard for us to do it, but we will try, providing that all the clods who watch television in the morning and listen to the smiling Liz Gonzalez and what's the other one's name? Paula Zahn. And Bob Lobel. Bob is okay. It was Howard Cosell and Dionne Warwick that I was really concerned about. Well, we shall be back right here on Greater Boston's only 24-hour talk station.
Talk Radio 68, WRKO, Boston.
At RKO radio station.
A shield law for Massachusetts now under debate on Beacon Hill.